This is the weirdest camera by far that I've ever taken into my hands. I feel like I need to come up with a greeting. Ahoy. That's terrible. Hi everybody. I'm going to do a camera review today of the weirdest camera that I have ever taken photos with in my entire life. That's this one here. But before I do that, I want to talk about something that I've been working on. So I have been doing a documentary project about some attacks that happened in the city of Hanau 1 year ago, in which 9 young people were killed. And I'm going to release this project next week on a different channel than this one. I'm starting a new channel that can host these kinds of projects that I also want to do. And if it's something that you think might be interesting, that you'd like to watch, then I'm asking now for people to go and subscribe to that channel. I don't even think I've ever asked on this channel for people to subscribe, but I did also look at different news agencies and other outlets for putting out this kind of material. But in the end, I decided I wanted to keep control over it, and I wanted to have the editorial decisions be made by me and people that I know and people that I trust, and to be able to present stories in the way that I would like to see them presented. These events have mostly only been covered inside of Germany. If I can reach a little bit of my audience and with the help of some friends, get more people to the story, that's something that would mean a lot to me, and I hope would mean something to the family that trusted me with their story. So go subscribe to Invisible Pictures, and there you'll be able to see when the video comes out. I'm planning to release it next Thursday on the 18th, and yeah, I feel like I'm babbling on a lot, and I'm going to get on to talking about the camera now, but again, that would mean a lot to me. So, on to this guy. There you go. This is the weirdest camera by far that I've ever taken into my hands. I've been wanting to get a camera like this for maybe 10 years or so. It's a panorama camera. So I'm going to show you, this is what it's like when you wind the camera. The lens is inside there. I don't know if you can see it. There's a very small lens. So you wind it and it rotates across this drum. And then when you push the shutter, it swivels back around. I've seen these cameras online. The most famous one is the wide lux camera, of the kind of cameras that I would just call rotating shutter cameras or rotating panorama cameras. The technology's been around for a long time. It's a similar technology that they use in horse racing, as far as I understand it, to decide the winner of the race, where this shutter is actually moving across the film plane instead of the shutter just opening and closing and lighting the entire film plane or sensor plane or whatever you want to call it. But this whole type of photography is very, very different in that that's not what's happening here. There's a small slit behind the lens that kind of, as far as I understand it, there's an aperture in the lens, and then behind the lens is a slit. And when you click the button, it lights the film plane like this, with a stroke of light that goes across it instead of opening and the light hitting the entire film plane and then closing and returning the film plane back to darkness. So yeah, I heard about this camera from Stanley Kubrick. He liked to use them a lot. There's some pictures that he took on the set of 2001: A Space Odyssey that I always thought were beautiful. I like the way it rounds the straight lines of architecture. It also reminds me a lot of Wes Anderson and the way that his films look. And Jeff Bridges famously used the Widelux camera, the actor, the Big Lebowski, the dude. He took a lot of pictures on sets of the films that he worked on. If you've never seen them before, go check them out because they're really cool looking. He even did this type of photography where he would wind the camera and have one person stand on the left side of the camera and start the shutter, and they would make a smiling face on one side and then run to the other side and make a frowny face while the camera was running. He would get this sort of actor portrait of the famous drama and comedy masks that represent actors and acting. There's another photographer that I like a lot. His name is Jens Olof Lastheim. I don't think I'm saying that right. But he also uses a panoramic format. And I just love his work. I think that so many of these pictures work in a beautiful way because it feels like two different pictures, which is kind of the tableau concept of image making, where inside of one single image you've got multiple framings going on and multiple subjects. And yeah, all of that got me hyped up to the idea of taking panoramic photography for years. I've seen some wide-deluxe cameras and I've seen them online on eBay. They're usually very expensive. And I also didn't really like the way that they look, to be frank. They kind of look like something out of a Batman movie where the production designer wasn't quite as inventive or just didn't have the most aesthetic eye of all time. They look strange to me, especially on the front. They've got this sort of wing-like pattern, and even the top of the camera. I've held one in my hands and looked at it. I'm not so crazy about the way that it looks, and I'm superficial, so that's important to me. Then I saw one of these guys in an antique store maybe 2 years ago. I had never seen one before, and I was immediately fascinated, and I didn't buy it, and I regretted it for years afterwards, but I didn't have very much money at the time, and I just couldn't justify buying it at the time. It seemed like too much money to spend on something that I might not use very much. I would say I'm equally as poor today, but I did find one on eBay that was cheaper than the one I saw in the antique store, and it looked to be in good condition, and I ordered it, and I was praying that it would arrive and not be broken. And I ran my first roll of film through, and I was so blown away by the results. I'm so happy that it works. There are a few frames where it seems to have a bit of a hanging shutter going on or some kind of a light leak. But then again, the camera's pretty old, and I think it's only on certain shutter speeds that's a problem. The other fascinating thing about the shutter speeds with this camera, and I don't think it's the same on the wide-lux camera, is that the shutter speed just is determined by that slit on the back of behind the lens. So the way I understand it, when it's a quicker shutter speed, the fastest one is 250th of a second. Then you've got a smaller slit, and so when it scans across, each little section of the film gets lit for a shorter period of time. Like basically, the smaller the section of your exposure, the faster your shutter speed. So when you open it to, or when you slow the shutter speed down to a 30th of a second, that slit opens up so that when it's panning across, the film receives more light just by the fact that that slit has gotten larger. So what's fascinating is now the camera is set to a 30th of a second. I'll wind it and set it to 250. And you see the motion is exactly the same. So there's just one standard speed of the rotation, and the only thing that changes is the size of the slit behind the lens, which is pretty cool. In terms of how this camera is built, it feels like a tank in your hand. It feels like nothing's going to break on it. I find it pretty easy to change the shutter speed, but I find changing the aperture a bit difficult, and I really thought I was going to break the camera, or that I was doing something wrong the first time that I changed the aperture. There's a saying in German, nach fest kommt Löse, which means like if you push something too hard, you're going to break it. And I was hearing that in my head a lot when I first changed the aperture. Loading the camera is kind of tricky. I was worried about that, but after my leg experience especially. But I have to say, it was way easier than I thought it would be. And the frames all turned out perfectly. The spacing between the frames was perfect and consistent. I got 21 exposures to a roll of 36 frames on a regular camera. And I found that mechanically everything is really well thought out. It's really easy to use. I remember when I closed the film door the first time after loading, it didn't make that like really pleasing sound that it just made a moment ago. It didn't have that clicky sound, and that made me a little bit freaked out, but turns out it was closed. No big problem. Also, resetting the film counter is really easy. You pull up this little knob here, and then you just rotate a wheel that's underneath it. There, it's very easy to use. One of the coolest features about this camera is the viewfinder. This viewfinder has a level built into it. You can see there a little bit. I'll also put my iPhone up to it and show you what it looks like. But the other thing is, just when you look through the viewfinder, you realize the scope of how much this lens covers. I think with both of my eyes open, if I put the center of my vision where the camera is pointed, I can't see with my peripheral vision any more than what the camera sees. Really blows my mind. You get, I would say, about 180 degrees of whatever's in front of you will end up in the frame. I really recommend this camera. If you see one, buy it, take it out, and play with it. I bought it because I have a specific project in mind that I want to do with it also, which I'm hoping to do over the summer if things ease up with Corona. And I also know that there's another version of this camera that's a little bit newer, but I wasn't that interested in it because it's made out of plastic, and to me it looks like a really awkward sex toy. But yeah, I'm not that interested in it. I think it has some more features on it, but it really looks like some weird underwater camera made out of plastic that will fall apart if a mouse farts upon it. Yeah, so I did get some other extras with this camera that I wanted to show. It came with the original manual, which is pretty cool, but it's got some pretty groovy design stuff going on. And it came with a bag. That's the camera bag. I will say the camera's small enough to put in my coat pocket, but there's a pretty swanky bag in case you want to go out looking really fly. Also came with this little guy, which is a grip. You can screw on, well, let's scratch the bottom a little bit. You can screw on to the bottom of the camera because the camera is, you know, relatively heavy, and this just adds a little bat grip to the equation. It really does make it easier to hold. So yeah, again, I think that the design of the camera is really well thought out. It is a Russian camera. I'm guessing this is one of the later models that was produced maybe in the 1960s. But yeah, I cannot tell you enough times how fun this camera is to use. Every time I see it sitting on the table, I want to pick it up. I want to just watch the shutter go across. And everybody that comes over, it's the first thing that I want to show them. I'm just going to say a disclaimer. There's not that many people coming over these days. And I know that I've been saying don't buy new gear and just use the gear that you have. But I think if you want to do something for a specific effect that only one type of camera can accomplish, then yeah, I mean, if you got a little extra money, you know. Again, next week I'm going to release that video that I've been working on, this video project about these attacks that happened in Hanau. Hope you go watch it. I hope everyone is safe and doing well. I'm feeling better. I don't know if you can tell, but the sun is actually shining in Germany the last few days, which has been a great reprieve from the long winter of gray and fog and cloudy bleakness. I hope you're all well. I hope to see you soon. And yeah, I'll keep you updated about Invisible Pictures and what I'm doing over there. All right. Take care. One more time.